Batman Vengeance, developed by Ubisoft Montreal and released in the fall of 2001 for the PlayStation 2, is an interesting title for me to talk about in Batman's video game library, because despite its positive reviews upon release, it's widely considered to be one of the best Batman games of all time, and Batman is of course my favorite superhero. I don't really have a lot of experience with it. I never owned Batman Vengeance when I was younger. I never got the chance to play it as a kid. I got my first PS2 a few years into its lifespan, so I never saw the game's launch in action, never saw any copies of the game on store shelves, and years later, I could never find it in any of the discounted used bins, for whatever reason. Maybe it was just really popular, or rare. Back then, I didn't have the resources to track down any specific game like I do now, so Batman Vengeance was just one of those games that passed me by. Now, of course, I do remember it, and I remember wanting it. There were commercials that would air on television. I think it was even featured in an episode of Video and Arcade Top 10, a show I used to watch on YTV up here in Canada that would show footage of all the latest games. Though I can't seem to find the episode number, so maybe it's just a case of the Mandela effect. Who knows? Regardless, Batman Vengeance, despite being this classic and iconic Batman game that so many die-hard fans of the character put in high regard, is one this Batman fan never got to play and experience firsthand as a kid, which, when I phrase it like that, sounds kind of depressing. But don't feel bad for me, because I own the game now, and I can play it whenever I see fit. But I wanted to bring all of this up to give you guys perspective with this video, with this review, because even though I am a Batman fan, I don't have any nostalgic biases towards this game in particular. My views on it have not been warped or influenced by any past memories I have with it. I'm not viewing it from the lens of my inner child or anything like that, like I have done with some of my past reviews. This video is going to be very genuine, unbiased, and recording the footage for this review, it was only the second time in my life I had played this game from start to finish, so my opinions on this title are very fresh, very raw. Anywho, Batman Vengeance is a 3D platformer that puts emphasis on Batman's combat skills and vast array of unique gadgets with its gameplay. There are a total of 19 levels in the game, and they offer quite a bit of variety to them. Some place you in indoor environments, some in more open areas, like a series of Gotham rooftops for example, and there are even a couple driving stages with the Batmobile and Batwing to switch things up. The Batcave is featured in this game, but not as much as I would have liked. Apart from a training mission you do in one of the side rooms at the beginning of the story, and the occasional cutscene that is Batman talking to Batgirl at the Batcomputer, you don't really get to explore it, which is a real shame. There isn't a whole lot to do there, it's basically an empty area, but I would have liked to see the Batcave act as a hub location in between levels or something, allowing you to access them with the Batmobile maybe. Like I said, Batman Vengeance puts a large emphasis on Batman's combat and gadgets, and even though this game is 20 years old, a bit dated in areas, I thought the gameplay was pretty solid and really fun, for the most part. The combat system is really effective in my opinion, because it doesn't make Batman feel too overpowered. Taking out each criminal feels like a true fight, a back-and-forth contest. You have to hold down the block button and wait for your moment to strike, try to take your opponent off guard, and string together enough blows to deal damage, sometimes knocking them off their feet. When the power meter below your health begins to fill up by hitting strikes or getting hit yourself, you can activate several takedown moves by holding L2 and simply pressing an easy sequence of attack buttons, depending on which takedown you want to perform. The fuller your power meter is, determines which takedowns you can perform, and each one deals a certain amount of damage to your opponent. These takedowns are incredibly satisfying to pull off, and mastering them can allow you to turn the tables in a fight almost instantly. If you want to avoid combat altogether or disarm enemies of their weapons, you can do so by throwing batarangs at them, tie them up with nets, or shock them using stun rounds, as long as you have ammo for these gadgets in your inventory, which can be found throughout the levels. Whenever an enemy is defeated, they will remain unconscious for a limited time, and will hop back up to fight you again. So if you have any handcuffs in your inventory, you'll want to make sure to use them as frequently as you can. The game tells you that you can use stealth to avoid combat as well, but unfortunately, it's not implemented very well in this game. Batman can hug walls to move through certain obstacles, and in the training sequence in the Batcave, the way you're taught to use it, one would assume it could be used to sneak by criminals too, but it never works. Not only are you not given any opportunities to really try that tactic out, but enemies will hear you regardless of what you do, so stealth is never really a factor. You forget it's even there. It's completely pointless. And let's talk about the first-person mode, because this is how you use all of the gadgets in this game. While not completely terrible, it doesn't make or break your overall enjoyment of Batman Vengeance. It's also not ideal and kind of awkward. Constantly having to switch between third-person and first-person perspective can become a bit disorienting, because it breaks up the flow of gameplay. The camera in this game is also fixed and cannot be adjusted outside of using the first-person mode, which leads to a few frustrating deaths at times, because you are unable to line up jumps properly. The story of Batman Vengeance spans 5 episodes: A Girl to Die For, In Cold Blood, Plant Food, Fool's Grave, and Infernal Jest, all presented similarly to episodes of the original Batman animated series, all with their own title cards in the form of loading screens. Though the title card concept comes from Batman the Animated Series, the overall visual design of this game is based off its sequel show, The New Batman Adventures. If you were to consider this game canon within the DC animated universe, then it would most likely take place before the start of The New Batman Adventures, due to the absence of Robin and Nightwing. However, the game does feature Batgirl, who aids you from within the Batcave, feeding you useful information throughout the levels. Episode 1, A Girl to Die For, has Batman rescue a woman named Mary at Gotham Chemicals from a bomb planted several feet away from her. The Joker had kidnapped her son Toby and is demanding a large ransom for his return. The Dark Knight manages to track the Joker to Gotham Bridge and battles the villain, swinging on a giant wrecking ball. It's revealed that Mary was Harley Quinn all along, and her son Toby was just a ruse to trap Batman. The episode ends with a fun confrontation between Batman and the Joker, one of the few instances you actually get to lay your hands on Joker in these more modern 3D era games, and the Joker is knocked off the bridge by Batman. He tries to save his foe, but is electrocuted by Joker's joy buzzer, and the villain meets his untimely demise. Episode 2, In Cold Blood, centers around Mr. Freeze. He attacks Gotham Industrial Research in order to kill a scientist there named Isaac Evers, who had created a form of medicine known as liquid promethium for the cryogenically frozen, a drug Mr. Freeze had used on himself and his wife Nora in the hopes of curing them of their ailments, but it was unsuccessful. Freeze wants revenge against Evers, and you find out through Batgirl that Evers lost the government funding for his research because the liquid promethium drug was far too flammable and may have reached out to the Joker for funding instead. While tracking down Evers' financial records on a data disk in cold storage, Batman is attacked by Mr. Freeze. The encounter you have with the villain is one of the more memorable in this game. It has you detonating remote charges to drop cryotanks onto Mr. Freeze, eventually cracking his helmet and forcing Batman to use his own freeze gun against him to cover him in a protective layer of ice to save his life. Episode 3, Plant Food, features Poison Ivy. She has been blackmailing rich socialites in Gotham, including Mayor Hamilton Hill, after infecting them with worm-like plants that require a special kind of plant food to satiate their hunger, or else they begin to devour their hosts. You get to take on one of Ivy's mutated plant goons, the one seen in the episode House and Garden from Batman the Animated Series. Batgirl is even attacked by a group of humanoid plant creatures, and you have to rescue her on a moving train, which is pretty cool. The episode culminates with a battle against a giant plant monster within Gotham Chemicals. Batman manages to electrocute it, as well as Ivy, and he is able to retrieve the antidote to save all of her victims. Episode 4, Fool's Grave, has Batman spot a group of criminals dressed as mimes, hijacking a blimp, believing Joker may have somehow been responsible. He speaks with Harley Quinn, who has given up her life of crime following the death of the Joker, and tells Batman that some of Joker's men are still operating without him, and that they have stolen some of his toys, as well as the blueprints to Gotham Gas Works. Batman learns that they have been placing firebomb jack-in-the-boxes into Gotham pipelines in order to, presumably, destroy the city. The Dark Knight manages to turn on the water and flood them out, and Isaac Evers is revealed to be the true mastermind behind the scheme. He wanted to destroy Gotham Industrial in an insurance scam. He couldn't collect following Mr. Freeze's attack without revealing his financial backers to the public, one of which had been the Joker. However, Joker's goons had turned on him. He lost control, and instead of destroying Gotham Industrial, they wanted to burn down the entire city. After Batman surrenders Dr. Evers to the police, Commissioner Gordon is struck by a batarang, and Batman is blamed for the attack. The GCPD begin hunting the Caped Crusader, leading to a pretty epic and tense chase sequence across rooftops and inside several buildings, forcing you to take on a police helicopter at one point. Thankfully, Batgirl comes to the rescue, and Batman is taken back to the Batcave. The final episode, Infernal Jest, has Batman investigating who has framed him, and to see if he can find any evidence hinting at the Joker's survival. He goes to Joker's old hideout at Funny Bones' warehouse, disguising himself as a criminal, and finds the knife Joker had been holding the night he fell from the bridge. Batman manages to track down the stolen blimp and confronts the Joker, who reveals himself as the one who has been pulling the strings behind the scenes, manipulating all the other villains, Isaac Evers, and even Batman himself, into helping him achieve his dastardly plan. Joker had funded Evers' liquid promethium in order to use it to make a new form of Joker toxin that is highly flammable. He had provoked Mr. Freeze into attacking Gotham Industrial, gave Ivy the chemicals so she could enhance her plants, faked his own death, and framed Batman, having the police go after him in order to distract him long enough so he could mass-produce his Joker toxin on a grand scale. He tricked Batman into turning on the water at the gasworks so he could pump his toxin into it, allowing him to essentially burn Gotham to the ground, having its citizens choke to death on their own laughter. The ultimate punchline is that Batman made it all happen. The Caped Crusader manages to shut down the flow of chemicals and defeats Harley Quinn along with her henchman Fatty, a large clown armed with explosives, a flamethrower, and a jetpack. Hilarious. Before following the Joker to his blimp for one final showdown. You disarm him of his Tommy gun with a well-aimed batarang, and then battle him much like you did on the bridge at the beginning of the game, mano a mano. Once the Joker is defeated, all of the villains get locked up in Arkham Asylum, and Commissioner Gordon thanks Batman for saving the city and apologizes to him. The police had found Harley Quinn's fingerprints on the batarang that hit him, and Batman is relieved of all charges. The story of Batman Vengeance is pretty solid and engaging. At that time, this was easily the best narrative found in any Batman game up to that point. The graphics, awesome cutscenes, and overall visual design of this game effectively capture the look and atmosphere of the show it's based off of. It feels like you were playing one long interconnected episode of the series. It features the voice talents of several actors and actresses reprising their roles from the DC animated universe. You have Kevin Conroy as Batman, Tara Strong as Batgirl, Mark Hamill as the Joker, Arlene Sorkin as Harley Quinn, Diane Pershing as Poison Ivy, Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. as Alfred, Bob Hastings as Commissioner Gordon, and Michael Ansara as Mr. Freeze, in what would be his final performance as this character before his death in 2013. Compared to newer Batman games, most notably the Arkham series, which clearly took influence from this game in areas, Batman Vengeance does feel a bit more tame in regards to its narrative and gameplay. Its story features a small handful of Batman villains, making it feel far less eventful and even a bit underwhelming by comparison, but I don't think it damages the overall enjoyment you have playing this game. It's still a very satisfying experience, even after all these years. The first-person mode is easily its weakest aspect, along with its fixed camera when playing in third person, but the game makes up for it with its incredibly gratifying combat system. I have seen a few people label it as button mashing, and nothing more. Also, that enemies will sometimes gang up on you, making it really difficult, but these same people refuse to mention the ability to block, as well as perform the various takedowns, making me believe they simply do not know how to play this game, didn't take the time to look up the controls in the menus or something, because this combat system does have a level of strategy to it, and the takedowns are very easy to perform, and like I had mentioned earlier, you can turn the tables in a fight by using them very quickly, so I don't understand some of these complaints regarding it. The hardest part of this game doesn't lie in its combat, it lies in the aforementioned first-person mode and fixed camera that can lead to countless unnecessary deaths. The placements of checkpoints can also be frustrating in a few areas, mainly the gasworks level, because you basically have to beat like 90% of it before you get a checkpoint. It's the level where the issues regarding the first-person mode and fixed camera are the most apparent, at least in my opinion. While the combat system in Batman Vengeance is great, one of its strongest elements, I do wish there was more of a focus on stealth, because the framework is there. The game tries to push for it a little bit, but then doesn't follow through with it for whatever reason. It's like the developers ran out of time or something, forgot to take all the references to being stealthy out of the finished game. It's really odd. Batman Vengeance features a few puzzles, and I found most of them to be quite enjoyable. One has you lining up colored paths to redirect currents and unlock a series of electrical doors. Another has you finding 3 numbers to get into the Funny Bones warehouse, located on 3 separate statues, symbolizing the wise monkeys, see no evil, hear no evil, and speak no evil. And on Joker's blimp, Batman is forced to mix chemicals together, creating Joker's favorite colors, purple and green. While the puzzles aren't that challenging, I did enjoy their inclusion nonetheless. Batman Vengeance is still a very strong Batman game, and one of the best based off the DC animated universe, though I would still put The Adventures of Batman and Robin for the Super Nintendo above it. It had a sequel entitled The Rise of Sin Chu, released in 2003, featuring an original villain created by acclaimed comic book artist Jim Lee, which is pretty cool. I do own it in my collection. It allows you to play as additional characters such as Robin, Nightwing, and Batgirl, but I don't know when I will be able to cover it. It features a multiplayer option that I would prefer to play and capture the footage with, maybe with my brother or something, but until the world can return to some form of normalcy, that option is off the table right now. I want to thank you all for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've played Batman Vengeance before, let me know what you thought of the game in the comment section down below. I also want to thank all of my patrons for voting for this topic on patreon.com. Your support makes video projects like this possible. I will see each and every one of you in the next one. Take care and stay nerdy.